listening to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network, the nonprofit organization that strives to address the staggering disparity in resource availability for individuals suffering from mental health disorders, processing disorders, addictions, trauma healing, and sexual identity challenges. Together, we strive to end the stigma associated with these challenges so that true healing can begin. Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network. I'm your host, Ange, and welcome you to episode number 29. Today, we welcome author Elizabeth Hamilton-Guarino, the founder of the Best Ever You Network. If you are seeking change and want to align with your higher purpose, the power is in your hands. In Elizabeth's book, The Change Guidebook, she has created a framework for crafting a new way to move through the world and inhabit our lives. By using the tools provided within this book, you will experience the joy of living life as someone firmly grounded in values, anchored by a consistent moment-to-moment practice of gratitude, starting with learning how to change your outlook on life. So, who's Elizabeth? Well, in 2008, Elizabeth closed the door to her finance office to think about her life. When she opened it, she walked out, leaving behind an almost 2-decade career in the financial services industry to open the doors for the Best Ever You Network. Today, Best Ever You is a multimedia brand and platform with millions of fans and followers worldwide. As the CEO and founder, guiding spirit and energy behind the Best Ever You brand, Elizabeth brings audiences together with encouragement and inspiration. She understands firsthand the challenges of life, work, family, change, and struggle, and has worked with people worldwide to illuminate their light within and help them uncover their best life in a better way forward. Elizabeth is a best-selling author of multiple books in the children's book genre and the self-help category, including the best-selling and award-winning books Percolate, Let Your Best Self Filter Through, and The Change Guidebook. Elizabeth's gratitude-based belief systems and behavior have helped people to transform their lives by using her unique blend of humility and world-class excellence as a guide. Elizabeth is a member of the Forbes Business Council and creator of You Magazine. She hosts her long-standing syndicated podcast, The Best Ever You Show, which has millions of downloads and listeners. Today, as she continues to expand Best Ever You, Elizabeth has returned to the financial services industry and serves as the Chief Executive Officer of Compliance for. Elizabeth holds a bachelor's degree with honors in journalism from St. Ambrosia University in Davenport, Iowa, and attended Harvard Business School for Leadership. Elizabeth is also a certified master coach through Wainwright Global Incorporated. Elizabeth lives her daily life with multiple life-threatening food allergies. In 1998, she nearly lost her life from an allergic reaction to almonds. In 1999, she suffered a near-fatal allergic reaction while 6 months pregnant with her third son. She and her unborn child were hospitalized for more than a week following the reaction. Therefore, Elizabeth is now served as a spokesperson for the Food Allergy and Anaphylaxis Connection Team and Medic Alert Foundation for over a decade. She works tirelessly to support others with similar conditions. She and co-author Sally Huss teamed up to create the best-selling children's books, A Lesson for Every Child Learning About Food Allergies, and Dream Big with Food Allergies. Elizabeth was featured in the book One of the Gang with football great Jerome Bettis. Elizabeth and her husband Peter reside in Maine, have been married for over 25 years, and have 4 adult sons. As a family, they donate their time, money, and other resources to enrich the lives of others and support important causes. They have baked and donated tens of thousands of chocolate chip cookies for organizations and people throughout the United States. In fact, Elizabeth Cookies even won first place in the Cumberland County Fair in Maine. Elizabeth and Peter also share 3 rescue cats and 2 dogs, Harley and Bahama, love the name Harley, and can often be found in their gardens, in the pool, raking leaves, or, depending on the season, in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. In this episode, Elizabeth shares that she is donating books to listeners and a few highly coveted personalized vision statements. If you're interested in either, email us at podcast@recoveryadvocate.network.org for next steps. Alrighty then, what are we waiting for? This is exciting. Fill up your coffee, sit back, relax, and let's get started. Good evening, listeners. I am very excited to have Elizabeth here, the author of several books. The one we're focusing on today, perhaps, or we're starting off with today, the one that she sent me to read that I'm very excited to talk about is the Change Guidebook. But why don't we kick off, Elizabeth, by you telling us about yourself and why you're here today?
Well, thank you for having me on, Angela. I really appreciate being here. I'm here to help. I'm here to help people be their best. My whole goal is to sort of meet you in that moment and help you move forward and help you be your best, be better every day, live your best life, all of those things that you can surround with the word best and kind of go from there. We're kind of, my mom, when I created besteveryou.com, my mom said, boy, that website has everything but the kitchen sink on it. I'm like, bring on the kitchen sink. Whatever's going on, we've got something to say about it, I'm sure. But I'm 54. I just turned 54. I'm a mother of 4 sons. They are 20. I'm going to have to get this right. 22, 24, 26, and 28. They're all turning odd numbers this year. So they'll be 23, 25, 27, and 29. So we're getting up there in all of our ages. I'm the creator of the Best Ever You Network at besteveryou.com and the author of books, like you said. I live in Maine, and I'm here to help.
Okay, so every single listener that's listened to this podcast has probably immediately said, okay, now I know why Ange wanted to have her on the podcast. Because so much of my mantra and everything that I say is, for example, I shared that my personal hashtag is Be Brave, Be Badass, because I believe every individual has their own personal badass. And what is my badass and what your badass is, Elizabeth, are completely different, but it's your absolute best. And I believe a lot of individuals haven't been brave enough to reach their badass. And so I want to be a part of encouraging and helping people be brave to reach their badass. And you with the Best Ever You Network is all about that. And you're be brave. No, let's see. It's be brave, be bold, be you, right?
It is. Be brave, be bold, be you. We say that a lot. I love that saying. I love your saying. I teach people to root in gratitude. I think the more and more I do this, I've been doing this since 2007 now. The more and more I do this, the one thing I see common in just about everybody's story is that somebody somewhere got a hold of that person, whether they were young or whatever age it was, and created doubt, created a feeling where they just It either wiped, it's even happened to some of our kids where they just self-confidence gone. Something about them with a gaping wound, a hole, something that just eats at them. And I see it over and over and over again. And so one of the things that I've been saying more and more and more is to really get in there and remember your value and surround yourself with love. I cannot say that enough, to surround yourself with people who believe in you. And if you don't know you yet, to find people who believe in you more than you believe in you in the moment and start to heal and so forth. I can't say that enough. From even just a sports perspective of one of our sons playing college sports and being around a bad coach, that give up moment. And, I think we all have these experiences where someone has created some type of hole in our worth. And it's like, wait a minute, I gotta know my worth, know my value, and be my authentic me, and have people around me that love me for that.
That is perfect. So I was just thinking, one of the things that I'm actually surprised this connection just tied together in my head. And that is, okay, in episode 13 of my podcast, we talked about the link between childhood trauma and addiction.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that because oftentimes in society, and with Rand's desire to reduce the stigma of mental health challenges and to reduce the stigma of addiction, I often hear individuals who aren't educated on where addiction comes from say, oh, this individual should just stop drinking or should just stop and really put a lot of blame on the individual without understanding that addiction no one just one day said, hey, I just want to be addicted to meth. Like that wasn't on anyone's bucket list or their Christmas list. They didn't tell the tooth fairy when they were a kid, hey, here's my tip. Make sure I'm a meth head.
What I want to do when I grow up. Yeah.
No. Right. Exactly. Is donate future teeth to you. I actually didn't purposely make that connection. Anyways. But when you're saying that, so in that episode, we talked about that. However, what you just tied into is additionally the fact that at some point in everyone's life, somehow we lost a little bit of our spark somehow.
Yeah. And
by losing that spark, and maybe it is we then either became a bad boss. We were, had a bad boss. We became a bad coach or a less than awesome coach, had a bad coach. And those experiences formed us into who we are today.
Yeah.
And our childhood formed us into who we are today. The connection that really the light bulb, which actually you have a light bulb on the front of your book, which I love. And the light bulb that just went off in my head was after I did that episode with the link between childhood trauma and addiction, I went around and told a lot of individuals in my support group, if you learn anything, it's protect our children every step of the way. And what you were just saying, I thought, wow, if we protect our children and we protect each other in all these ways, we're not just creating better human beings as far as in relationships, but we're creating better coaches. We're creating better bosses. We're creating better leaders. We're creating all of that. If we instill how can you be the best you and not take away that spark at that point?
It's hard when you have to, if you teach kids this when they're young, or if you have the opportunity to, it creates kids with better tools in their toolbox when challenges come up, it creates a value system in people if they don't have one for when you're around situations or people or whatever, and the values don't match up and you go with the crowd or there's so many things that play into this. But I think giving people tools in their toolbox to navigate so that people can come back to right here, like come back to their heart and really think with their heart and be their authentic selves without question from anyone. I think that's one of the most important tools that maybe I can give people is to find your core, go to the core of you and understand, okay, this is what I like. This is what I don't like. This is what I need. This is what I don't need. This is what I want to do. This is what I don't want to do. And put, almost, I don't want to give a total black and white thinking, but sometimes that's needed to get a value system, a foundation going of what you want to live by and the rules you want to instill and so forth. And then, in my first book, I wrote a book for Hay House called Percolate, Let Your Best Self Filter Through. That was my very first book. And I talk about, finding the core of you and when things go this way and when things go this way. But one of the things that you know how to do, and I just gestured with my hands right or left, one of the things that you know how to do is bring yourself back to core and what matters most to you. Because one of the things that I think people forget over and over again is that we are not entitled to time. I think people forget that. And we walk around feeling entitled to being here. And actually we're not. And so when you think about your life in terms of, I'm not entitled to time, it puts you into precious moments. And it makes you start to think about how each and every moment that you're here matters and that you matter. And I think that you matter to more people than you know. And I think it's really, really important to think about. You're not entitled to time, but all of it. And it makes how you carry yourself, conduct yourself. Like I've always had this saying, even since I was probably a little kid, you're the CEO of your life. You're in charge. And the decisions you make every moment, I have another saying, every morning you wake up, peace is right at your doorstep. It's like a matter of choices. Peace is right there. It's a matter of the choices that you make in some cases. And so I think that you do have the opportunity to create peace in your moments if you're willing to go there.
On page 5 of your book, one of the quotes that I like is you said,
commit. Page 5. Hang on.
Turn to page 5.
Okay, I'm turning.
I interviewed Sandra Rostarola, the author of Making Friends with Monsters, which, by the way, if you've not read that book, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And I kept referencing a part in her book, and she suddenly was like, okay, I want to see what it is you're referencing in this book. I was trying to keep it a secret. I want all the listeners to buy that book as well. It's amazing. So on page 5, the quote that I wrote down was, that ties to what you were just saying, was commit to live differently, commit to be your best. You only get one passage, one ticket on the train of life. And I love that. That's exactly what you're saying. I think individuals do forget that and get caught up in the day-to-day rut of life and forget that today is today's only day.
Yeah. If you can take your life and root in gratitude, one of the things that I teach people to do is deeply root in gratitude. And it might start as, a list, and it might feel really awkward at first to sit with your pen and paper and write down 5 things you're grateful for. And you might feel in that moment, well, this sucks, this is awful, this is horrible, and this is everything. And you've got kind of a negative, low vibrational type energy going. But if I could challenge you to maybe do one thing, if you leave this podcast doing one thing other than, I'm going to send you a bunch of books so you can give them to people. But, if the book helps you, that's great. But if you aren't into reading or, do one thing, simple pen and paper, write 5 things, 10 things, 20 things if you're inspired to that you're grateful for. And start with breath. Start with, I'm grateful to be breathing, period. Something that we also take for granted. And go all gratitude on yourself. And think about things. One of the things I've said since I've worn glasses glasses since I was like in 4th grade. And so I will say little prayers to the glasses gods, to the eye doctor gods, because I have -9 eyesight in each eye, terrible eyesight. So I'm so grateful for contacts and glasses all the time. Something silly like that you're like, oh, I take it for granted that I wear glasses and contacts. I got bullied for wearing glasses and contacts. Okay, well, oh, well, I don't know if that makes complete sense, but
it absolutely does. Well, the science behind it is legit.
When you start to do that, even if it's like one thing you write every day, if you hate doing this or whatever, do it anyway. And write down one thing you're grateful for every day. And start the practice of doing that, because what it does is it changes your brain. It changes your subconscious thinking. It changes your energy. It changes your vibration that you give off, everything about you. And eventually you get to the point where you're kind of a good problem solver in a way, because when drama comes up and when problems come up, you have what I call with you a gratitude flip. If you want to, if you do gratitude enough, you get to the point where you're like, oh, well, flat tire, I can deal with that. I'm breathing. It creates a wonderful perspective if you allow it to.
I could not agree more. And we did a whole episode 5 with Linda, my friend Linda. We talked about self-care and we talked about gratitude. And we talked about how she started doing gratitude lists a couple years ago, solely because I didn't bully her into it. I kind of bullied a couple of my friends into these gratitude lists. And so she was like, okay, Ange just sending me gratitude lists. I want to keep track with Ange. So I'm going to do gratitude lists back. And she still is so amazing at sending gratitude lists. And the thing I love about gratitude lists, especially if you become a part of a gratitude community, so a couple of key friends that you share gratitude lists with each other, is I will read her gratitude list and then I will think, wow, I didn't even think to be grateful for this. Yep. I didn't even think about this. And so it just expands the level of joy. And I would encourage individuals, and
Linda's going to, she listens to this podcast. She's going to listen to this and she's going to say, yeah, Ange, I'm looking back and it's been a few days since you sent your gratitude list. So now I'm going to get in trouble. So I'm going to hold myself accountable to that. However, I would also encourage individuals to do your gratitude list in the morning to start off your day before you go in and have the challenges of the day. Because that, to me, I have spent a couple of years doing this and I've tried it a little both ways. And I find that when I do that and center myself in a spirit of gratitude, and exactly that. Sometimes I'll send with one of my friends in a recovery program, I'll send him my list. And at first he was like, these are kind of some simple ones. And I'm like, yeah, you don't have to have something extravagant to be grateful for. You just have to be. So the book though, that we're going to talk about as well is the Change Guidebook. So it's how to align your heart, truths, and energy to find success in all areas of your life. And you've already done a little bit of teaser of your heart center, and you talk a lot about gratitude and heart center throughout the book. And I think I want to take a couple of steps back and ask you to tell the listeners what motivated you. So I know you wrote Percolate and you talked a lot about the motivation for Percolate in the book, but can you then say, what was it that made you decide, okay, now it's time to write this book? Because listeners, the Change Guidebook is actually a book. I'm not opposed to writing a book. So if you look, I actually have written in the first chapter where I went in and answered all my numbers. See, I have my numbers in here. I put my numbers.
You did.
I did.
I did. Yeah, I
exactly.
did it too.
Yes.
This is everything in here I use. I use it myself. I use it with clients. Anything.
So this is a workbook in life. This
workbook.
is change management at max. This is change management to how to be your best ever you. And every chapter walks you along this journey. It's laid out so well and has so many motivational quotes in it, which everyone knows I love. So tell me, what motivated you, one, to write this? And then I have not read Percolate yet. I will read it, but I have not read it yet. But tell me, what motivated you to write this and to write it in a format that was so actionable for the reader?
Okay. There's a couple different stories. I'm trying not to be really long-winded, but I might have to talk a little bit. So I'm a person who has life-threatening food allergies. I have 4 life-threatening food allergies on board, and I've almost died a bunch of times. Terrible, terrible food allergies, and I've been resuscitated, all sorts of things. And I really felt like crap about myself, just terrible. And it was just really struggling with not seeing that there's a lot worse things to have. And, woe is me, mode, victim, all that stuff. Anyway, that's me. Then my father had a stroke in 2004, and he had a stroke in the middle of the living room floor. My brother saved his life, and he survived with terrible things, terrible complications that most people wouldn't survive and so forth. And he was in a rehab facility. So fast forward just a little bit. This is what Percolate's about. He was in a rehab facility, and the nurse said to my mom and me, okay, we're going to take Jim down to speech therapy now and see if he can talk and all these things. And so it took about an hour to get him down there, and he was pretty quiet and tired. And the nurse said, okay, Jim, we're going to play the alphabet game with you. And she turned to me and my mom. She goes, most people don't say anything. With what's happened to him, don't expect much. And my dad, when she said A, he said aardvark. And we're all like, oh, great. Something's on board. He's seeing things. Then she said B, and he said benevolence. And then it went like this: courage, determination, excellence. F was a swear word: gratitude, happiness, integrity, joy, kindness, love. M was movies. No, open-minded. It went on and on and on in that moment of somebody being very, very sick, very, very weak, to kind of put their foot down and say, I'm here, I'm living through this, and so forth. And so I took out my pen, and that was kind of the moment where I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started to feel like, well, okay, I kind of get this, we're stronger than this. For sure. We can overcome things. We have faith. We have hope. We have gratitude. We have all these things. And I'm like, I don't think I even knew what gratitude meant at that point in a way. up to that point, not in any serious practice or anything like that. I think I was more feeling entitled, empowered, less empowered, more entitled, kind of going through on the wave of life, that kind of thing. And so I took out my pen and I drew this, I'm a terrible artist. I drew this teapot and it had the ABCs coming out the spout. And I'm like, ABCs of life. And I turned that into Hay House, with each chapter being one of the words that he said with a chapter on it. And they were like, no, that doesn't work. And I'm like, well, how about percolate? Let your best self filter through. And they're like, yep. And we changed it a little bit, but that's the basis behind that book. And that's the moment that I kind of started to be the author that I always promised myself I was going to be back in kindergarten, because I always knew I was a writer. And in fourth grade, I think my teacher in fourth grade said, you're a writer. And I listened, and that's what I always wanted to do. So I have some children's books. I have some self-help books, all that good stuff. But there was a really long period of time, a pretty big gap between Percolate and the Change Guidebook. And that's because my dad was so sick. It's because I didn't feel like writing. That's because I didn't think Percolate sold enough copies. And in fact, Hay House was like, yeah, you didn't sell enough copies. I think that, I think you need to stop being an author. And I'm like, no, I'm not listening. So there's a naysayer around you who creates a wound. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not listening to you. And I found an agent in New York, and HCI Simon & Schuster picked me up and gave me a big hug and said, no, you actually can do this. And I learned, and you asked me how I structured the book. I structured the book so that I wasn't alone writing a new book, because I didn't feel so good. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. This is the way people feel. People feel alone, and they feel like they're the only one with this problem. And that I don't want anybody to know this about me, and all these things. And so the book is structured with narrative from me, which, as you can see, I can talk plenty. And then 2 exercises to kind of illustrate the point. And then furthermore, 2 stories from other people to really hit the point home. And there's 10 chapters in the book. And that's the way I'm structuring my books from now on, because I love to hear from other people. And it makes writing the book so much more fun because, 20 contributors show up, and it's just a blast. So, yeah.
And the stories are amazing. Absolutely amazing. I listened to each one, and I think the story, it's hard to say which story is my favorite. The one that I believe I was most inspired, that I really attuned to, is the spinal.
Oh, Haley Stark. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a girl here. So we live in Falmouth, Maine. And that's a girl now who's in her mid-20s. She's my youngest son's age. She goes to Harvard now. She's written a book, and she had a spinal stroke in high school, and she's partially paralyzed and things like that. She's a brilliant human being and a lovely human being. And I can't wait to see how her life unfolds. But yeah, her name's Haley Stark. She's more in the back of the book there with Olympia Snow, former Senator Olympia Snow, who talks about being orphaned at a young age, and how she went from being orphaned, no politics in it or anything like that, but she talks about how she went from being orphaned to, how she founded a huge leadership school here in Maine for girls in high school. And
what's amazing is that we've talked in several episodes, and I interviewed Scott Lynch, the host of The Motivated Mind, which is my favorite podcast, that and Andrew Huberman. And Scott, one of the quotes he says that I've now adopted as one that I love is, don't compare your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 10. And so I love when authors include stories like that into books, because most of us know the individuals in their chapter 10s. That's what we see in their outside world, right? And so we see them at their chapter 10, and to see their chapter 1 and to see it built into a book that is a guide step by step. We're going to do a change management guide, chapters 1 through, I don't know, is it 13 chapters or something like that?
There's 10 chapters, but there's 10 chapters, but there's 20 exercises.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah,
so every step of the way, and I know there are 10 steps, so I guess 10 chapters would make sense. each step of the way, when I was listening to different parts, I thought exactly that, listening as a reminder, and the thing that's beautiful of including those stories throughout is that if they're just in the beginning or just in the end, then as a reader, I would get somehow maybe have a bad day in the middle of the book and say, okay, I'm not that motivated. However, because they're interspersed throughout, then at each phase, it was like, okay, keep going. Okay, keep going. And I know I was looking up when I was Googling. If you see me look away, and for audience members, you can't see my eyes, but sometimes when I'm interviewing someone, I look away because I'm trying to Google a reference. But Shahzad, who came up with positive intelligence, who I absolutely love all of his work, but he really, and I'm not going to get the stat correct, but I think it's something like, you'd only get about 20% out of any program that you do unless you do all of the exercises. So when I said I'm one of the individuals, I'm going to write in the book and do all of that, because in order to actually maximize the outcome of anything that you're doing, reading it is not going to get you there, but actually going through. So I love those exercises that are put in between, because I forced myself to do some of them along the journey, and I haven't done all the exercises yet, but I love that part of it. So yeah.
Well, I tried to create tools, and that's part of Best Ever You too, that adults can learn from in all different ways, because some people learn by listening, some people learn by reading, some people learn by doing, and so forth. So there's a lot of tools in here. But you hit on a couple things that I wanted to go back to. And one is that I intentionally put 10 chapters in here based on that quote. Actually, it's interesting because I love that quote, and it's one of the quotes that hangs in front of me too. And so that's why there's 10 chapters pretty much in every book that I write, because I really, so make sure and tell them that, because
I love that. That is amazing.
Yeah. So that's a thing. That's the thing for me. So it's funny that you said that, because I'm like, I wonder if anybody will ever pick up on that. And I don't know if you picked up on it, but that's a thing. And then the other thing, I totally agree with that. You might get 10 or 20% out, or you might stop or whatever. And so I intentionally, when I wrote this book and when I wrote the book that's coming out in April, the Success Guidebook, I make the end stronger, because I know people put down books. So keep going. If you go little and you're like, oh, I don't like that part, put it down and pick up chapter 6 or skip something or do whatever. I intentionally write my books so that you can put it down, pick it up and turn to a page and start again. However, the exercises in the book, they do play off one another. So I intended it for somebody to be able to pick up this book and work through it's change management. You can literally take the book and work through a change. I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to quit smoking. Whatever it is, you can take that change and work it through this entire book. And we don't have very many people who, when they do this, aren't successful. I can think of just like a few over the years that are just like, I'm going to do something else. And it's mostly just because they stopped and kind of didn't want to do it. You got to do the work. That's the thing. There's work involved, and nobody can do your work for you. So yeah, that's.
And what would be the point if they did your work for you?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Then you wouldn't be able to say, I did it. So that makes so much sense what you said about making more powerful at the end. So yes, thank you for donating some for our nonprofit auction. And the books that are donated for our nonprofit auction, if those authors are also guests on the podcast, then for those books, we also add on them the book club stickers, and I use them and mark them up with the highlights that I made in them as well, and autograph them as well. So listeners, if you're interested in a copy of the book that has both my annotations and Elizabeth's, you can bid on the auction for that. So what was funny, because of this, I always buy a book. So I had already bought a book, and then I got one in the mail from you. So I always buy a book, and then I was listening to it on Audible because I said I wanted to listen to it again this weekend. And so here I am cleaning my Jeep, listening to the book, and I'm listening to chapter 10, which is on impact. And I kept thinking, wait, I need to go highlight that quote. I love that quote. I need to go highlight that quote. So it's so funny. But I do want to read this quote at the beginning of chapter 10. So this is on page 185. And so it's on impact, which I love. So in the point of impact, we become mentors and teachers, using our knowledge to help others and being the change we wish to see in the world. We are leaders who recognize the intangibles. We also recognize that while we are teaching, we are also receptive to being taught. We are lifelong learners. There is respect for others who know a subject better than we do, and we realize there is plenty of room for others. Our impact, comments, and interactions are respectful to all we encounter, even if we challenge the status quo. Oh my gosh, absolutely love that. And so that made me think of your work in the Best Ever You network. Can you tell us about your network? What does a platform look like and how did you start it? And I noticed a couple of things I was thinking about. Do you want to at some point weave in Elizabeth's pretzel theory? Because I did imagine trying to do the pretzel theory, and the pretzel theory ties to the episode I did on boundaries. I think it was episode 8 we did on boundaries, which I love. So I'm going to read the pretzel theory at some point when it's appropriate, and then the toss the spaghetti component of it. But can you tell us about your Best Ever You network?
Sure. So a huge part of me is financial services. Like I always say, half of me is financial services and half of me is self-help. My career has always been in the financial services industry since I was probably 20, and I'm 54 now. However, I quit a long time ago, the financial services industry. I've been pulled back in recently, but I did quit for a pretty big chunk of time and thought when my youngest went to first grade that I would get all suited back up and go back out of the house and go run a financial services firm. And it completely was awful. I was in the middle of 4 boys. I'll call them boys because they weren't grown men. They were grown men, but they were acting like kids. They were fighting. And I'm like, I'm a mother of 4 boys and my kids were littler at the point. I'm like, you guys act worse than them. And they were just crazy. So anyway, I closed my door in that moment and wrote the plan to Best Ever You. And I wrote down on my notebook, there's got to be something better than this. Best Ever You, Best Ever Me. I'm like, Best Ever Me doesn't sound right. I can't be the only human being that this is happening to, having this terrible tug with the, it's like the mommy wars everywhere. Do you work from home? Do you go to work? All this stuff. And I just am a human being who felt like I was just ripped in two. Like I could not focus on work because I had kids at home. I could, I just want to do everything to the best that I can do. So I wrote it down in that moment and I quit that job and came home and said I quit. And everybody was like, oh my God, why, what, kind of thing. It was a pretty shocking moment. And I marched myself up the street to my neighbor's house, who, and this is back in 2007, phones were barely a thing back then and websites were creeping up, and it just wasn't a big thing. And I said, about websites and domains and all this stuff. Can you get me Best Ever You? I think that's what I want, kind of thing. I think I want to do this. And she put up this little website for me, registered the domain, and I interviewed my best friend from kindergarten as my very first interview. And I wanted to help her be her best because she was all bummed that she couldn't have kids at the moment. She just felt like she was having trouble having kids, and she was sewing every baby bibs for everybody else's baby births and all this stuff. Meanwhile, mopey inside. And we featured her, and then also someone who knew how interior design and knew paint colors really well. Those are the 2 things on the website. It's just like a mishmash. I'm like, I know I'm going someplace here with this. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know people need this help. And it was a little bit of just friends, what they needed help with and what I needed help with and whatever. And we put together this website and it had 1 million visitors within, a year. And it has just grown from there. It's grown into the Best Ever You show with 600 shows and 5 million downloads. It's grown into books and, and the thing of it is every day there's still more work to do. You always feel like you haven't touched enough people or you haven't met you continuously are meeting people and sharing your message and connecting with them and hearing their message. And so it just keeps going. And I love every minute of it. But that's the Best Ever You network. We're here to help you be your best in whatever area of your life it is. I'm a master life coach and I teach people to become life coaches. So I do the certification for life coaching. Whatever people need, we're there. We do a lot of articles. A lot of the stuff is free. It costs to get a life coach certification. It costs life coaching. But if you look on the website, there's so much there that's just right at your fingertips free. And I think that's pretty special about it. There's a lot, and it's not just me yapping. It is people, authors, experts. There's a lot of people involved. I forgot about the magazine too. We put together a magazine quarterly called You Magazine. We just had the beautiful Sophia A. Nelson on. She's another author of Be the One You Need, and tons of people involved. So, yeah.
I think also I just want to encourage listeners. I can hear someone in their head. I'm in all of your heads. And we only have listeners. We only have listeners in 18 countries. And I'm not going to say only, because when I hear someone say only about their accomplishments, I immediately interrupt them and say, never say only again. So I'm going to erase that and say, I'm very proud to say that we are 3 months in and we have listeners. We're 4 months in now. We have listeners in 18 countries. I'm very proud of that.
Bravo.
So in those 18 countries, then there's at least one individual who's thinking, I don't have time to do this. And so I would say the exact opposite. You don't have time to not do this. The best investment I have made in my entire life has been continual education, little snippets at a time. And there's so much research that shows that if you just improve one part of yourself, your being, your surroundings, whatever it is each day, then the cumulative improvement in your life, your surroundings, your happiness factors, all of those things is just absolutely amazing. And I can relate to the finance. So your finance decision was in 2007. My financial decision, where I also worked in finance, I was really good at it and I absolutely hated it.
Yeah.
And so in 2004, quit finance. I was 29 and I had a special needs 2-year-old and went back to school at Georgia Tech to get my degree in biomedical engineering. Everyone thought I was crazy. And it was the best decision that I ever made. And when I talk to individuals who are miserable at their jobs or miserable in this line of work and say, I'm too old I'm like, I was 29 at Georgia Tech with a whole bunch of 18-year-olds. And I had a 2-year-old that had physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy 3 times a week. Seriously, you can do it. And it is so worth it. And I think that's part of a journey. And if you can do it in a network of individuals that you're doing it with, which is what I envision the Best Ever You network is, it's not just you by yourself, but it looks like it is just this whole camaraderie of people that are just giving you hugs from around the globe.
That is exactly it. And it's something, it's a community. We're really big on Facebook too. We have a closed group on Facebook. You can literally go in there and write, I'm having a crappy day, and 20 people will show up for you. So yeah, it's a giant group hug. And I think the coolest thing about it is advertisers over the years have been well, what's your demographic? And I'm like, I hate that question. And I don't say hate, but I hate that question. It's I don't want there to be a demographic. So we
say humans.
Yeah, I said
humans.
And so at one time I'm like, we are right, and we've been this way since the start. We are 50-50 male, female, all ages. And
that's amazing.
That needle has not moved. I just looked the other day. I'm like, I was talking to somebody like, what's your demographic? And I'm like, oh, there's that question. And I said, we don't move off this needle. We are 50-50 male, women, all ages. And it's just spread out. And that's the same thing in the book too. I wanted to write a book that anybody could pick up. There's no demographic with this book. In fact, the ages of the people who contribute there's teenager all the way up to 85, male, female. And same in the new one. I have a child actress in the new one, and we go all the way back up into the 80s. So there's people of all ages. And I think to me, that's one of the best respect moments that you can have, is just respecting all of the differences between us is so huge, because we're not all the same. We're not cookie cutter. There's not a formula that fits us all. And that is really important to recognize. And that's kind of what the pretzel theory is. You asked about the pretzel theory. And it was funny when I was writing this, I'm like, I had my son sit on the floor. I'm like, okay, take your right leg and put it behind your left ear, and take your left leg and put it behind your right ear. And he actually sat down on the ground. He's like doing it. I'm like, oh my God, you can kind of actually do that. And he's like, and I'm like, now take your right hand. He goes, I can't do that. And I said, I'm kidding. I just wanted to see if you'd actually do it. But it's like a total pretzel theory of what pretzel shape are you going to morph yourself into for other people. I said, don't ever do that for anybody ever again. Be yourself. And he goes, oh, I get it. Okay, good one, Mom, kind of thing. And he was really cute about it. He goes, you should put that in the book. I'm like, I'm testing it out on you to see if I should.
And it totally
definitely
worked.
Has to go in there. Yeah, because he was probably 20 at the time. And
I want to read the 2 sentences you said after that. So you did. This is in Success Tip 17. Yep. Learn Elizabeth's pretzel theory. So listeners, it's on page 77 of the book when you buy your book. And so step 1 is, and you know what, listeners, if you're really feeling adventurous, you can go sit on the floor in the middle somewhere and try this. Go for it. And if you can accomplish this, then send us a photo and make your comments.
You don't want people to get hurt, but yeah.
Exactly. Step 1. So step 1, take your right leg and place it behind your left ear. Step 2, take your left leg and place it behind your right ear. I can picture the pretzel now. And then step 3, take your right hand and grab your left shoulder. And step 4, take your left hand and grab your right shoulder. So
it's pretty impossible to do. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You are now a delicious pretzel ready for consumption. And guess what? As my theory goes, if you twist yourself into a pretzel to please others, you'll be eaten alive. And so I love this. When I highlighted this, I said, this really ties into the topic of boundaries. And I loved doing the episode that we did on boundaries for the podcast. And boundaries, I'm super passionate about it. I love Cloud and Townsend's book on boundaries. I love the fact that no is a complete sentence, and that I say to individuals all the time, you only have so many yeses. So for every time you say yes to something, it means you're saying no to something else. So say yes to things wisely and make sure what you're saying yes to is not putting you into a pretzel, but is setting yourself up for success. So when I think about that, then I think of a big part of the book, and something that you are very passionate about are vision statements. And you did talk about your period of time when you didn't have a vision statement. And I believe that was when your father was really ill in 2017 and 2018, where you said it was when you were lost and why. And I think that was when your father was ill. But maybe can you tell us a little bit about vision statements and how they build into the network that you have and maybe your professional coaching, and then also maybe tie into what's next in your next adventure?
Absolutely. So a vision statement is a tool I use in coaching, and it comes about from me asking you a series of questions, and then I take your answers and I write them differently. I write them into something called a vision statement that you can listen to every day for I'll record it for you too, or you can read it yourself and record it, but it works best if somebody else reads it and then you listen to it every day. And it is just a powerful tool that reprograms your subconscious mind. And if you listen to it enough, it's kind of like your mind catches on and starts to believe it. And it's just crazy funny how it works. It works. And I've had people use these for everything. Everything from weight loss to selling books to quitting jobs to moving to it's taking something that you want to do and believing that it's already true to see it through to make it happen. And that's really important for people, especially if you have goals in mind, and they don't have to be lofty goals, just like a goal think of a goal, any goal. And we create a vision statement around that. And it can be multiple areas of your life. It could be one goal for one area of your life. It can be a whole life revamp. It can be anything you want to be. And it's this catchy little tool called the vision statement. And it takes a couple minutes of your time every day for I have people who get a new vision statement every quarter and they get a new one going. But usually they work best when you listen to them for 30 to 45 days straight.
Your vision statements are a lot more intense than any idea of a vision statement I had prior to reading the book. And I want to read what you said. So on page 41, when you talk about vision statements, you say, A well-written vision statement celebrates you. I love that part. So I can envision, and one of the things I think that is one of the reasons it would be in my head more impactful to hear somebody else say it to me, right? To celebrate. Okay. And you are strong, you're resilient, you're whatever. Okay. So a well-written vision statement celebrates you and guides you in your daily choices. It provides encouragement and the direction necessary to chart the course for your best life. Your personal vision statement illuminates a path that is full of infinite possibilities. It removes limiting beliefs, roadblocks, and other obstacles we put in our past that potentially limit our success. Yeah. I love that. And so I read these vision statements and they are pretty elaborate.
They are. This was a mother-daughter that was in my class. Yes. I trained them both to become life coaches. It was a really cool moment, actually. It's Deb and Cheryl. And so if you're not familiar with vision statements, if you're listening right now going, okay, this show just took a twist of something that I don't know about, it's meant for your ears to perk up and teach you something that you may not know and have you go, a vision statement. What's that? A vision board? Oh, I've got one of those. No, not a vision board. It's a vision statement. And they're very carefully crafted by, I don't know, I craft them for you, I guess. I'd be happy to, give away 1 or 2 vision statements for your listeners if you want. I can do, if you and I can decide that afterward, if you want to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, we'll give some vision statements away, which would mean that you're going to work with me for an hour or 2 and I'll streamline it a little bit, but I'll ask you the questions, then I'll write it for you. And then you'll get back on the phone with me and I'll record it for you. And then you'll have that. And I think, if I had to sum up a vision statement, I was thinking about this as you were talking, they anchor you in your power. I think that's the best thing that they do. They're just it feels silly at first. I know the first time Barbara Wainwright taught me about vision statements, I was like, Barbara, this feels really dumb. I told her, I'm like, this feels
When
stupid.
I first started listening to it in the book, I thought, ooh, this would feel awkward hearing this.
Awkward. Yes. Yeah, totally awkward. You got to be like, so you got to really put on that, okay, this is going to be awkward, but it's because your brain isn't used to listening to it. Your brain's like, whoa, I just heard a foreign language. Say that again. So when you're working with me, I actually deliver the vision statement to you like 5 times before your brain catches on. The first time I read it to you, you're like, whoa, I didn't even pay attention. And so you have to read them a couple times to the people and then they go forth and listen. And they really change your life. I have seen them in motion. I used a vision statement to create Percolate. I went to Barbara Wainwright, who is the founder of Wainwright Global, who teaches a lot of people. She's my mentor. So I kind of help her teach people now, that kind of thing. But she taught me everything I know. And I went to her and I said, look, I need you to do a vision statement for me. So I become an author. I want to be an author with Hay House. I want to write this book. I don't know what it's called yet. I feel called to do this, blah, blah, blah. I have no idea what I'm doing. And she was like, do, vision statement. And I listened to that thing and it helped me become a best-selling author. And they just support your brain and support you in what you're trying to do.
There's so much power. And we know we've talked a lot about, and I know you want to say something, I can see your body language. We've talked a lot about the impact of negative things on your brain. However, there's so much in neuroplasticity that we know, and there's a lot of science out and so much research in neuroplasticity that your brain can grow and be rewired by appropriate techniques. And this is a perfect example of a technique that is so successful.
Yeah. And it's a tiny little thing that you listen to. And I love it when people say I don't have time. That's one of my favorite things. I'm like, yeah, you do. It's just, are you going to willing to do the work and take the time? And do you really want to do it? It takes commitment on your part and consistency on your part and discipline on your part and these things. I think one of the things that is really important to mention here is for a second is goals. Because one of the things that when you take something that you want to do, different thing to think it in your head, right? Like, oh, I'll give you an example. I don't want to be in Maine in the winter anymore. I want to be in South Carolina during the winter. Well, it's a different thing if I think that over and over again versus me saying it out loud into the universe you hearing it or somebody else hearing it or somebody else hearing it, and people sort of showing up for you to help you achieve your dreams and goals and wishes and things like that. So I'm a big fan of, if you've got something in your head that you're thinking about doing and you don't know exactly what it is, start to vocalize that and go a little bit vulnerable on it. And when you do that, it's scary, it's fearful, it's change, it's all these things. And if somebody says to you, oh, that's dumb, you'll never do that. That's what I'm kind of talking about back at what we started the conversation with, was the child wound or some wound in your, somebody somewhere said, no, you'll never be that, or no, you're never going to be good enough, or no, you're never going to do that, or whatever it is. Those are people that I love to equip people with two things: bubble wrap and earplugs all day long. Earplugs and bubble wrap, earplugs and bubble wrap. It's like, here's your set, and use them wisely, because you're going to get around people who say the weirdest crap to you. And you're like, well, that doesn't feel good. That doesn't support my dreams and goals or anything. And you might have to maneuver through a crowd to get to your tribe, to get to your people who help you be your best, what you're saying, your badass best, or whatever.
Be brave, be badass.
Yeah.
Be brave, be badass.
You really,
and you talk in the book
maneuver.
about picking. Yeah, you talk in the book about, I can't remember exactly what you say, but you talk in the book about filtering out the the unsolicited advice.
Totally.
And you wouldn't take advice on finances from someone who's constantly bankrupt. Oh. You wouldn't take advice from all of this. And I think, when you talk about, I don't have time, or I don't have, or all these negative things in your head, a quote that I got out of Dr. Constance's book. So we talked about this in episode 14, and he wrote the book Brave, 52 Weeks Being Mindful. So we talked about mindfulness on that episode, but I love this book. And I love this quote. He said, every life matters, including yours. Start acting like it.
Yep.
And I think this is exactly it, is that you do have time for all of these things. If you want to have time for happiness and to be the best life that you can have, and to live your legacy and build what really counts, then you have time for it. Trust me.
Yeah. I want people to fall in love with their life.
Yes.
I want people to stop hating themselves, hating their life, feeling like they can't, feeling like they're never gonna, all of these things that people feel, I'm never going to be this or that, or it's never going to change, all those things. I want to meet you right there in that moment and help you fall in love with your life. And if you're not in love with your life, call me because I want to help you be in love with your life. And call me is code for charge me. Call me is code for call me. You know what I mean?
I love that. I love that. And one other quote that I love is, and I'm looking over at my board. So I'm obsessed with quotes. I have them all over my office. I have some of them on my board over here, my dry erase board. And one that I just recently read that I really love is by Mabel Newcomer. And it says, you cannot build a reputation on things you are going to do. So I inserted another word. I inserted, you cannot build a legacy on things you are going to do.
Yep.
So listeners, and I will include all of the links, the appropriate links in the show notes. And I'll ask you, Elizabeth, also to now tell us how listeners can get in touch with you. So a couple of things is, listeners, pause the episode right now and go to her website, besteveryou.com, and bookmark it, and then go to your calendar and figure out a time, even if it's 15 minutes, a couple of times a week, block it off on your calendar, which is, I think, is one of the biggest tools of success I've had in life, is when I block time off. So block off time for your best ever you on your calendar. Go ahead and do it. Do it now, and then plan out and live those action items. And then if you are interested in collaborating with Elizabeth, which you would be crazy, listeners, if you did not want her to write you a vision statement, because these vision statements are amazing, then if you email podcast@recoveryadvocate.network.org, I will connect you with Elizabeth if you're one of the number that we settle on. And then she will work with you to help you reach this, because I know that there are listeners out there who are coming back from really tough traumas and tragedies and addictions, and listening to this podcast at a point of desperation in their lives. And I just pray that you take this opportunity to take that next step to be your best you. So now tell us, Elizabeth, what's up next with you and how can listeners find you?
So anybody can find me on besteveryou.com. You can join the website. It's free. Again, another free thing. I hang out in social media quite a bit. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, and I'm on LinkedIn. So if you want to hang out in social media, I'm right there. You can sneak into my DMs and I'm all good with that. So I'm right there and I love talking to people and stuff like that. What's next for me is a new book. I have a new book coming out. So I'm really excited about that. So it's called the Success Guidebook, How to Visualize, Actualize, and Amplify You. And so it's more of meeting people in those moments and helping them, be successful. It's the same format as the Change Guidebook, 20 more contributors. And I think one of the things that's been really special about both the Change Guidebook and the Success Guidebook is 2 of our 4 sons have contributed stories. So in the Change Guidebook, Quade's story is in there. And it's about how he was rejected at getting into all the colleges and things like that. So he's now in Georgetown's medical school. And so if you read that story and see where he is now, you're like, wow, that's a story. And then same thing with Cam, another story of just complete rejection and turning that into something. And he played baseball at Georgetown as well. And so, there's just some cool stories in there and the Savannah Bananas are in it. If any of you have heard of the Savannah Bananas, they're that baseball team. Google Savannah Bananas. You'll know this. They're in the book.
I'll Google it now.
Yeah, you got to Google the Savannah Bananas. They're a baseball team. And there's just all sorts of cool stories and people that showed up again. And I just love it. So the Success Guide, it comes out in April.
Okay, I was going to ask when it comes out. So you'll definitely have to let us know so we can let listeners know about that as well.
What happens with books is they're in pre-order mode. And the more pre-orders we have, the more chance the book has at actually existing in bookstores and things like that. So
how does someone pre-order a book like that?
They just go right onto Amazon or Barnes & Noble and they just put in a pre-order. And then in April, and then in April, it charges your credit card. You just put in the pre-order. It doesn't even charge you until April.
Well, I've learned something new. If I ever become an author one day, I will pass that on. Yeah. And it is funny. I've talked about this on other episodes. My aunt has been trying to get me to write a book now for, my daughter is 21, for over 20 years. And I think at some point I might just have to have someone else help me write it for it.
Well, that's a vision statement. And that's where, that's exactly how I became an author too, I saw somebody doing what I wanted to be doing at Hay House. And I approached her. Her name's Michelle Phillips. She wrote The Beauty Blueprint. I got on the phone with her and I'm like, look, I really love your book. I love the size of the book, everything about the book. It's this one. It's Percolate. I'm holding up a copy of Percolate. She helped me. She put me in touch with them and facilitated me to become an author, really. In addition to Barbara Wainwright, because I still didn't quite believe in myself. It's kind of one of those things where I was like, who's going to ever want to read my stuff? Kind of thing. You just have funny little self-confidence quirks with becoming an author. A little bit of imposter syndrome creeps up, that kind of stuff. We authors, we all help other authors.
I have found with the podcast and having authors on, the community is so tight-knit. Sandra Rostarola just introduced me to another author that she thinks would be a great guest on the podcast. And I'm so excited about it. And it just really, I love when you would think in communities, similar individuals would be in competition. And it's not. It is like, I want to lift you up and lift each other up. And because we know how hard and challenging it is and how beautiful that is. Yeah. All right, Elizabeth. So a requirement of this podcast is everyone has to share their favorite quote. So what's your favorite quote?
Do I get 2 or do I just have to do 1?
You can give 2.
Okay. I think the first one is don't follow. My kids were raised with this quote on the refrigerator, actually. It's don't follow the masses because sometimes the M is silent. That's just an
I love it.
Absolute favorite. That's been hanging on the refrigerator since the kids were like this big. And then, I don't know who said that. I don't know who wrote in any of these quotes either. So that one, I feel like I almost wrote that quote. It's been hanging. I typed that out so long ago that I don't know if I actually wrote that quote or I heard it. So it gets confused, but it's been up there for 27 years now on the fridge.
Nice.
It's a long time. And then the other one I think is be somebody who makes everybody feel like somebody. I think that's a really
beautiful.
Important one because I think to the core, when you encounter people, it's very, very, very important to pause and treat every human being, dog, animal, cat, also, whatever, with kindness, respect, elegance, cooperation, grace, collaboration, compassion, all those words that my dad kind of said and more, and really pause to do that because it's in the hustle and bustle of our days where we're just passing and beeping and honking and not paying attention and all these things that the ache comes in a lot. And if you just stop and pause, even in the grocery store, to somebody who's in line in front of you or near you or whatever it is, pay attention to the people around you carefully and create that space where you are treating people with kindness. Because it's just important. Every single person you encounter, that's how we all are our best. It's with those pauses for actual awareness of other people.
And you just reminded me, the thing I forgot to ask you was, is there anything you really wanted to make sure the listeners heard today that we didn't have an opportunity to share?
I think that was it.
I think it was too.
Yeah. There was when my dad died back, it's almost 5 years ago now. It'll be 5 years ago on Thursday. I came back home here to Maine. I was in Minnesota and I was up at the grocery store and I guess I was crying over pears, standing over the pears crying. And I'm like, I think they were beautiful pears, but I was bawling in that moment. I don't know, something got me. And this lady came up to me. It was an older, shorter lady. And she was like, can I give you a hug? And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to take that. And as she was hugging me, she goes, oh, sweetheart, which one of your parents just passed away? And I'm like, how do you know that? And she goes, the look on your face and your energy and everything about you screams it. And I was like, that is the weirdest thing. And in that moment, I just sort of totally stopped crying and felt like I don't know, it was like an angel or something. I didn't know who it was. It was before COVID. I didn't know who that was. I still have never seen her again. I've gone up there so many times looking for her. It was just the strangest moment ever. And from that moment on, I was like, oh, okay, everything's all right. It was very strange. So I'll leave you listening to that story.
Definitely. I'm glad I almost didn't ask that question because I thought, well, she's ended the podcast so beautifully. Don't mess it up. And now I'm glad I still asked that question because that was absolutely amazing. I love that story. Thank you so much for your time. This has been magical.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You just listened to episode number 29 with author, leadership coach, financial wizard, and chief cookie baker, Elizabeth Hamilton-Guarino. We hope that you've been encouraged and learned something from today's episode. As a reminder, in this particular episode, Elizabeth shared that she is donating books to listeners and a few highly coveted personalized vision statements. If you're interested, email us at podcast@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org for next steps. As a reminder, the experiences and advice expressed in this episode are the host and guest's own personal stories and do not represent the opinions of any organization mentioned. RAN is passionate about opening the doors for all voices and experiences, not just those expressed in any particular podcast. If you want to share your experiences or expertise, we encourage you to be a future guest by emailing us at podcast@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org or submit a blog post by emailing blog@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. We also encourage you to comment on the episode so that we can continue to provide content that is most beneficial to the community. We are proud that every individual working with RAN does so on a 100% volunteer basis, so you can support the mission by clicking the love, not like icon on our podcast and subscribing today. We hope you will also connect with us at www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org, where you can donate to the mission, read those blog posts, and stay in the loop about upcoming events. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Recovery Advocate Network and on Twitter at Ran to Wellness. So, listeners, pause what you're doing right now, subscribe, follow us, please give us a 5-star rating, and provide some feedback. And finally, most importantly, share these episodes with your friends. You never know whose hearts you will touch. Be a part of the reason someone has new hope today. If this episode was triggering to you, we encourage you to contact your support system, therapist, national and community support groups, the Global Crisis Text Line by texting 741-741, and/or, if in the United States, dialing 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Thank you for saying yes to sharing your time with us today. We know you are super busy and hope that these chats help you become your best ever you. Now, you know what to do next. Back to your coffee. Until next week. Thanks for listening.